Greetings. I am with Esperanza Martell, and today we're going to have an interesting subject we are going to discuss, and we are going to be speaking about the historical significance of ancestral trauma within the Taino hierarchy or the Taino community. So, just first, please introduce yourself to the people.
Esperanza Martell. I am a Boricua, Afro-Taína, and I have been dealing with, on a personal level, with historical trauma, but also with women, primarily women of color, in undoing historical trauma. So it's a real pleasure, Peter, to be able to talk about this topic. It's not something that I do on a regular basis,
Okay.
and most of my work is not has been in our community, and it's not. I would say it's. I've been doing a indigenous healing circle underground for many years.
Okay.
So it's not part of any institution, or it's just my a personal commitment to my people to uplift us,
Right.
a, as you know, we're being the attempt to kill us
Right.
um, by illnesses, by the food we eat,
Right.
by alcohol, by drugs, whether they be pharmaceutical drugs or whether they be self-medicating drugs. And I've looked in my work, one of the things that I've done is really look at our history as indigenous people, both in the Taino and African culture, and how do we use our traditions in our healing, in our day-to-day work
Right.
with our people. I'm an old elder in the community, and my commitment is to pass on the knowledge
Right.
and train as people, many of our people as possible.
That's good. What I see when it comes to ancestral trauma, what I see, is mainly a disconnection from the culture and the spirituality, and that's more so through has what has happened to us as a community, with the conquest and other historical events. So what I would like to start is to ask you, what is your take on ancestral trauma to you?
Okay. I want to reference some authors before I begin speaking. One of them is Frantz Fanon, uh, who wrote a great deal of, about internalized suppression of sexual trauma in the records of the earth, and and really gave us definitions that we were looking for, like in the 60s, and also Pablo Freire, and he in Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and all his other books, he talks about we have to, and both of them talk about decolonizing the mind
Right.
and how we have to re-educate ourselves.
Right.
Um, and to be able, we have to free ourselves
Right.
through education and self-healing, and at the same time, free the oppressor.
Right.
And then I want to talk a little bit about Dr. Maria Yellowhorse Braveheart, who since the 80s has been doing, she's Lakota, and has been doing a work around historical trauma in the reservations in the United States.
Okay.
And I want to use her definition of historical trauma. She says It's the collective emotional and psychological injury, both over the lifespan and across generations, resulting from a, a historical perspective of genocide. Okay? So, is the impact of the colonialists, whether it was the colonialists under Spain,
Right.
in particular in Puerto Rico, or the colonialists under the United States government, and the violence that they committed against our people and continue to do so. So it's the penetration, because it's a rape of our country and our people
Right.
by Europeans,
Right.
with not only physical, right, with cutting off hands and the feet, the tongue, and the raping of the women, but also taking our culture away from us, our religion, our values, demonizing our belief system,
Right.
and and making us slaves. You know, not only slaves so that for their economic profit,
Right.
but also spiritual slaves, with imposing Christianity
Right.
on us.
I agree. You know, I also see what's the most difficult thing to deal with is the mindset, you know, because it has imposed a certain mentality upon us. So it's something that's a little challenging to shake off. You know, we have to have patience with among one another, you know, because, you know, to deal with ancestral trauma, it takes time and care to address.
Well, it does. It does. And one of the things is, you know, Christianity is based on blaming the victim. It's based on sin. It's based on hating the other and enslaving people actually physically and psychologically. So one of the things you have to really look at were the practices of the Spaniards and what they actually did to colonialize us physically, and also to colonialize us mentally. A, and then once we understand what they did and why they did it, then we could begin to decolonialize our mind, and we could begin to reclaim our culture, and we can begin to create models for liberation,
Right.
right? Both psychological liberation and liberating our land, that's still today under colonial rule, right? It's still today under colonial rule. Um, and it's about really letting go of the fear that they put into us, that they fed us. A So that is the work.
Mm.
How do you do that? You know, how do you empty individuals and fill them up with their traditions, their culture, their values? Right? Especially in Puerto Rico and Puerto Rico here in the United States, where it's already over 100 years of colonialization
Mm.
and being whitewashed, right? Because that's what they do. They feed us their values, you know, their corrupt, sick values. So that's the work. And I think many people are beginning to look at, and have for many years now,
Mm.
on how we actually do that day day to day, day to day, because we could talk about the results of the penetration, whether it is during a Spanish colonialism or U.S. colonialism. We know that as a people we're dying. We know that we commit violence against each other. We commit violence on our own bodies, right? We're committing violence against our children, against our women, against our elders. We know all these things. You know, we put into our bodies poison. Right? When we come from a beautiful culture and where we ate directly from nature and honored everything we put in our mouth. Now we eat non-foods, right? Which result of all the cancers, all the illnesses, you know, the diabetics, the high blood pressure, and I could go on and on of all
Right.
that we're
Yeah.
suffering.
With that, what I see with that is a lack of a rites of passage. You know, like when you have the backbone, the backbone gives you a sense of direction. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and I feel like that's missing, especially among the youth. You know, because the youth, they join gangs. You know, so they can get some coherence in where they want to go, and sometimes when that happens, it's the wrong kind of direction. You know.
So we have to look at a the different phases of oppression, right? So it's first they take our land, right? And this is based on economics. They wanted the gold, they wanted the land, they wanted everything we had, right? So, and um, and then there's political oppression. They create structures that are going to keep us in place, whether it is uh, the economic structures, the political structures, the social cultural structures, which includes religion, the schools, like the media. Um, these are all structures that have been created to oppress us, to keep us in line. You know, I always say to people, there's nothing wrong with capitalism. It just doesn't work for the majority of humanity, right? Because they being the white Anglo-Saxons, created capitalism to meet their needs.
Mm.
And in so doing was to really oppress us. So we need to look and really understand those structures.
Mm.
In the training, community trainings that I do, I go into power and oppression model, in where I really go in depth in looking at the ideology of capitalism, which is based on a um, white supremacy and patriarchal rule, and then I look at the structures that they created and how they use classism and sexism and racism to separate us. It's all about how to alienate us from ourselves. And the big part, which is what we look at in healing, is internalized oppression,
Mm-hmm.
right? How we take on those values of the oppressors, aka the capitalists, right? So we we develop their belief systems, and we become more violent than they are. We we want to look like white women, white men. We do all these surgeries. We straighten our hair. Um, we begin to hate ourselves, right? We hate our names. We hate everything about us, our nose, our lips, and we want to be like the other, right? Because if we're more like the other, in quotations, if we're more like the other, then we're able to maybe get jobs, get their crumbs, get their crumbs. Basically, is we are selling our soul to their devil, because in Taino spirituality, we don't have a devil,
Right.
but that's adopting their views.
Right.
So one of the things to really look at, that people really understand the connection with their day-to-day existence of feeling hurt, of feeling sadness, of feeling powerless, of despair, of anger, coming from that historical trauma that's happening every day. So whatever they're doing to us today becomes historical trauma,
That's a good point.
right?
Right.
So, and it's happening every day. Um, you know, whether it is like for 60 years they bombed Vieques in Puerto Rico. That community has been traumatized. The manifestation of that trauma is the rates of cancer, of every cancer that you can think on our people in Vieques.
Yeah. I see that all of that together has added on to the oppression.
That is the
Yeah.
oppression,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That is the oppression. So you need to look at, and people say, but why bother? Why should we look at history? Okay, so the manifestation, because the manifestation of historical trauma is that we walk around with unresolved pain and grief, aka with internalized suppression. We walk around, all of us, eh, and they say to you, well, you have to take responsibility. It's your fault that you're poor. It's your fault that you can't find a job. It's your fault that your man beats you up. It's your fault that this mother hits this child, and they blame us. We're the ones who have been victimized historically, and then we get blamed. Because if people start looking at the oppressors and that historical trauma, that begins to liberate them, and they don't want us to be free. They don't want us to be free. Whatever we're doing is to cope with that oppression. Whatever we're doing, whatever people do, is to cope from that oppression. And we hurt ourselves and we hurt others. And the history informs us to give us an understanding, and it empowers us to begin to look at traditional ways to free ourselves and to create new ways to free ourselves.
I agree. That was powerful. Next, when Columbus arrived to this hemisphere of the globe, or the West Indies, what our ancestors encountered through the conquest, they were not prepared for, in my view. It's a proven fact that our ancestors were tortured throughout history since the early days. One of the reasons for their ways of belief or their ways of living. Today, our people are not fully speaking their indigenous tongue, but they still carry on the tradition. My examples of the struggles of our peoples went through, some of these are the massacre at Palmasola in the Dominican Republic, the history of lynching in the United States and in the Caribbean, the mistreatment of the people by the Spanish, also sexual violence since the conquest, and enforced conversion. With the events that is occurring between Haiti and the Dominican Republic, now these are just what I'm using as a reference, the tensions between the two states of the indigenous island reflects the tragic events that has occurred to our people since 1492. What's your take on it?
Well, um, it's right. I mean, you're on point that that's part of the legacy of penetration, of first contact. That's the legacy, right? The legacy of pitting family members against family members. Eh, and also, you know, and also it has to do with the United States government and its legacy of pitting people against each other. I keep thinking of, and it's a setup. It's a setup for the Haitians. It's a setup for Dominicans. A For them to kill each other, like it happened in Rwanda. A in the 90s, early 90s. Um, so it's part of what colonialism does to people, right? And the bottom line is that people don't understand it, and that people are working from fear. So they're working for fear, whether it's the Dominicans or the Haitians, right? So there's an economic crisis in the DR, and my thinking is that they are forced to this forced migration of the Haitians to get them out of the island, because one thing is the Haitians who came to Haiti during the earthquake, right? Who have been there for 5 years. Who the idea is they were going to come to to the Dominican Republic, and then they were going to return to Haiti. But the workers who have been there for generations, whose children have been born there, right? Who are the backbone, the backbone of the Dominican Republic, a sugarcane industry, a who have been treated, they're economic slaves, right? It's like they comienda all over again. But now it's not Spain. Now it is the Domino Sugar Company of the United States government,
Right.
right? So uh, there's there is no logic of why you're going to deport your own citizens because they're a Haitian descent. And then the amount of violence talks to internalized suppression and that fear of, if we don't get these people out of here, we're not going to have enough to eat for ourselves. And these folks are supposed to be Christians,
Right.
right? And no tiene que tratar al prójimo mejor que como uno se trata,
Okay.
right? You have to treat your neighbor better than you treat yourself. So it is not, there's no understanding outside is that there has to be a requirement of the money lenders, maybe that's what it is, or they're being pushed by the United Nations and the U.S. to take these actions of their own brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
And it's really sad when you see black men beating black men and the images of cutting brothers' locks, or throwing a sister that could be his wife or whatever on the ground and beating them, and the many other acts of violence
Yeah.
that the Dominican government is committing. I want to make sure that I say the committee and empowering the mobs to do,
Right.
because it's not all Dominicans,
Right.
right? It's not all Dominicans. Some Dominicans who are standing up and who are saying this has to stop, basta ya. So that is my thinking on that issue. But it's part of that legacy of a colonialism by Spain and the continue. I mean, the bottom line is that Dominican Republic is a neo colony of the United States.
Yeah, I agree. What I also see, since 1492, uh, not just that island itself, but all of the indigenous island has been under heavily influenced by foreign rule, with Spain and France as an example. So, ever since that point, the people collectively, you know, they had a hard time in gaining their own image because they always had a foreign influence. So that's what I also see from my view from that. You know,
No,
yeah,
totally, I totally agree. I totally agree. And it is real sad that we as a people have succumbed to the imperialist values at this point of history of the United States, right? That is has its technical their hands into everything. So whether it is in Mexico, all in every indigenous land, they are with their economic uh, plans, they're oppressing our people, and then we adopt the same. They train the military in all these other places, so it becomes even worse. And then these governments are promoting a the white supremacist values. And then, I mean, it's interesting because people say, oh, no, we're not being racist. You are promoting white supremacist values, because a person is a darker shade of skin. And in the DR is people who are the same shade of
right,
skin.
right. Since the colonialism or the conquest, however you want to express it, you know, um, not just the island itself, but also the other islands. There's, but, but most importantly, on the island of Quisqueya, there's always been a social class issue, because when you look at the term race and value, like it's in, like in comparison to the caste system in India, because that's what they have created. They have created uh, a social class where the people cannot come to a point where they can create some sort of a remedy or balance, you know and so that's what I see with that as well.
Well, you know, race and class goes hand in hand, right? So we're talking about capitalism, which is the rich rule, white rich man rule, right? And they've created classes. And basically, you have the upper class, the rich, the 1%, and then you have the 99%, which are poor working class people. Not only in Haiti or Puerto Rico, but all over the world. And then we bring in the factor of race, and then they divide the class, right? They say those of you who are lighter skinned get more crumbs than those of you who are of darker skin. And then the people with a like get what is called white skin privilege, right? They get white skin privilege, and they don't want to lose their crumbs. And then they're used to oppress the rest of the class. But it goes hand in hand, and of course, the issue of sexism, because women are at the bottom of the barrel. Women there is no respect in any of our communities for women, right? Even in the Taino community, right? That is supposedly Tainos, I mean not supposedly to, so Tainos were a matriarchal society down a the women line past a the power in the relationships and all that. And now, you're expected to walk behind men. Men dictate, right? Caciques are men. No, caciques were men and women,
Right.
right? Boiques are men. No, boiques were men and women. But the men who are trying to reclaim our culture, our view of the world, are doing it through a Christian patriarchal lens,
Right.
right? So la casa, everybody is a referring thing, la casa. La casa, yes, he kept a diary, but with a patriarchal lens.
Right. You have the Christian mentality
Yes,
because Barney said it himself also. Their main interest was to convert them into Christianity. So Christianity has a very heavy influence.
of course.
Yeah.
So that you, the oppression continues. It's generation and generations. You're doing this great work around reclaiming a Taino culture, but what you're reclaiming is patriarchal Spanish culture, and when women were oppressed, right? Women were oppressed. So I always look at those things. I always look at those things, and it's important if you're going to talk about decolonizing people's minds, then it's real important to talk about everything out in the open,
I agree.
right? And to really you really question yourself. A, how come they're not women in these councils? What is going on, right? Or they are women and then they don't have voices, right? And also the whole issue of the lighter Tainos have more power than the darker skinned Tainos, right? Eh, when Tainos were all chavo, dark, like a penny, copper pennies, we weren't light skin. The light skin comes, that's due to the raping of our women, right? But there it is. They take the values of the oppressors and they put it on these new communities that they're creating. I think people have to question that,
Right.
and they have to look at that. And that comes from that internalized oppression.
Hmm.
That comes from that historical trauma. If you don't address it, then you're going to reproduce it,
Right. I agree.
right? So it's being reproduced. It's being reproduced. And we have different points in history and where we have raised up and they have committed genocides against us, right? A, the the Spaniards, the Spanish, from the beginning, their ongoing attempt to kill us as a people, right? And then a denial that many of the indigenous people went and escaped in the mountains. It continues their belief system, right, and passed it down historically to the generations to generations. So, in looking at Puerto Rico, right, we could talk about the horrendous things that the Spaniards did, and that's fine and well, right? But I think it's also important to talk about the horrendous things that the United States have been doing since the invasion in in 19 I mean in 1898. We were people who have resisted and continue to resist, right? And the United States has a tried to take our language, you know, the 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 Spaniards, their attempt was to take away the Taino language, and then the United States attempt to take up the Spanish language. You know, in Puerto Rico, there was a time when you couldn't speak Spanish in business. And to this day, they still run stuff in English in Puerto Rico, and we couldn't even have a flag. It would get against the law to have the flag. Many Puerto Ricans ended in jail because they had a flag. Okay? So, and it's not even the revolutionary flag that was created in the lattice rebellion, the Ancestral lattice. We're talking about the regular flag that we see today. So, and people had to study English in a classroom. So they tried to do that. The Nationalist Party of Puerto Rico and was decimated by the United States government. Thousands of people were arrested in the 1950s and tortured by the United States. All this is documented. You know, Albizu Campos spent many years in U.S. jails. He was ended up with all kinds of cancer because they were doing radiation testing on him. You know, the fear that everybody has because the United States has done this. That's historical trauma, right? There has been natural disasters in Puerto Rico, hurricane that's devastated the island. That also creates historical trauma. So we as a people have suffered in flesh, the atrocity of the United States government. Not only Spain, because we have to be real clear that the colonial mentality that we are fighting against is both Spanish colonialism and U.S. colonialism, right? So if we're not clear of that, then we can't find a way out, right? We cannot find a way out. If if we and people try to forget, go in denial, right? So the U.S. has done experimentation on Puerto Rican women, right? So at one point, one third of Puerto Rican women have been sterilized. And this was not, people say, no, this cannot be happening. You know, studies have been done, films have been made on the U.S. sterilization programs of Puerto Ricans and the genetic movement. This, can you imagine a whole town, all of a sudden, nobody's having babies. And they didn't know why. And the women had been sterilized. We carry that historical memory with us. Or when the United States government bombed Haduja. People won't forget those planes bombing this little town in Puerto Rico because the people wanted their freedom. This is serious, serious violence. And though the influx of drugs into our country, you know, who's bringing in the drugs to Puerto Rico? It's the feds. It's the U.S. government, right? Keep people silent. The alcohol, right? So we are not in touch with spirit anymore. We're feeding the flesh because the flesh eh, is in pain.
Mm-hmm.
And the bottom line is we need to bring the spirit back to our people,
Mm-hmm. I agree.
right? And stop giving them drugs. And forget the food. You know, they took our land. Here we were an agricultural people. We have forcibly migrated into the cities in Puerto Rico, and then we were pushed out and still being pushed out because today there's large migrations of Puerto Rico, Boricua, Puerto Riqueño. This is what historical trauma is,
Mm.
right? We have reactions to historical trauma. We have reactions. Look, my mother was born in 1923. She grew up with aunts. She was an orphan. She grew up with aunts who were born when the Spaniards were in power. They were violent towards my mother. Fast forward to when I was growing up. My mother did the same thing to me that they did to them, that they learned through the Spaniards. And what was that? Having a 4 or 5 year old meal on rice, because maybe I dropped a glass of water. That's the Inquisition,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how it gets passed on,
Mm-hmm.
right? If it wasn't because I really figured it out by learning history, I would have done the same thing to my child.
Mm.
Okay? This is what's going. This is what's going on. And we're talking about my experience being a mass experience because historical trauma is about a mass experience, right? If we are going hungry because we are no longer allowed to grow anything in our land and our land has been taken away, that experience of hunger stays with us and moved us to come to the United States. My mother was very clear, I'm not going to let my children die because of hunger. This is one woman's experience, but it's a collective experience that we carry, that we carry. So I grew up with my mother always saying to me, come, porque we eat because we don't know if we're going to eat tomorrow. You know?
Right.
This is the experience of Boricuas, the historical experience of Boricuas, aka Puerto Ricans. Eh, and this is the historical experience in DR. And that's the violence there, right? Or what's happening in Mexico with the disappearing and the murder of all these women. And the indigenous language being squashed. But we're reclaiming and we're looking for ways to go beyond surviving. Because we're good at surviving. We adapt to shit. We're very good. You know? It smells and we adapt to the smell. So that's what human beings do. So we have to go beyond survival. Beyond survival.
Yeah, that's good. Influences of foreigners, such as Spain, the United States, and other outside influences, the European has had an effect on how the people perceive and make relations economically with one another, creating a problem of the social class issues that we currently have today. Influences such as the conquest, the slave trade, the encomienda, and also the Inquisition. Forced conversion of the people has impacted how we view one another and look back at what we, as descendants of our ancestors, went through. So, what's your take?
I think I've answered that
Mm-hmm.
question. I think I've answered that question, and it's yeah, they really they really have done a job on us, you know, and some of them are very proud. Few of them have apologized. You're right.
Yeah, that's true. Uh, yeah. So, actually went very in depth. The change in the social class, the decimation of the social political structure of our way of living, the changes that took place since the conquest. Um, uh, you also went into the nationalistic aspect and the struggles in that. Um, as we carry in our blood memory, the genetic memory of the suffering and the pain that was lost. Um, an example that I see from this is the powwow. The powwow to me it represents a bridge in how people channel and what was lost, and as far as expressing and who they are as a people, like in comparison to people going to Sunday church.
Yes, and for Puerto Ricans, Boricua, I would say Bombi Plena, right? Bombi Plena, la, the La Fiesta Patronales, right, which are, they're Christian based because they're for saints, but at the same time, that's where we have reclaimed our culture. A, in Taino tradition, we talk about areitos, right? A celebrations of life, of culture. And the closest that that comes to in Puerto Rico is the celebration of Bomba and Plena. In the Dominican Republic would be the Gaga, Gaga,
Okay.
the Gaga,
Okay.
the Gaga music
Right.
and dance,
Right.
right? So yes, every culture has a powwow. They don't necessarily call it a powwow, right? But yes, and within that, within this this renewal of our culture, a we have we have reclaimed who we are as a people and how we communicate and how we love each other and the food that we eat, um, the social relations. Eh, in Puerto Rico, they're having areitos now, you know, at different the solstice. Eh, they're not called powwows. However, they're indigenous areitos in which people are bringing back or recreating indigenous dances, whether it is about fishing or harvesting or healing, whatever they are happening. So yes, I think that in North America the powwow is very important, and in in Mexico and the machicas with the Aztec dancing, and it's all about the same thing. It's about reclaiming our culture and our tradition.
I agree. Um, to wrap this up, in closing, rebuilding the backbone of our spirituality. Uh, when you look at the social political stand among our peoples, it's all distorted awareness. Uh, the pieces, like looking at a shipwreck in space, is scattered. Um, if the pain is not openly addressed as you spoke, how will the next generation learn to move forward? The approach is sometimes one dimensional, with the lack of addressing an overview of outside influences throughout our history as a community since the days of the conquest. Many aspects in rebuilding the backbone of the spirituality includes the language, the tradition, uh, honoring, and also community. So, in closing, what's your thoughts?
I really believe that we have to create sustainable communities and reclaim every aspect of our culture and an identity that has been lost. I've been doing this work, I feel like, forever. I think I was born. This was my purpose. So I've been really in reclaiming mode all my life. I was blessed because my mom was real nationalist. You know, you couldn't speak English in the house. We always ate only Puerto Rican food, and she introduced me to earth-based spirituality, and and even though she practiced different beliefs, when I chose not to be baptized, it was fine with her
Mm-hmm.
when she did an indigenous baptism.
Mm-hmm.
So, a not everybody grows up in that way,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, what I believe is that we need to bring that into the community, which is what I've been doing since, I've been doing a self-healing circles since 1987. And just taking everything that I've used traditionally to heal myself and taking it back to the community and say, look, it worked for me, it'll work for you, right? And this was mainly, the work has been with Puerto Rican women and um, black women, African American women, and some other Latinas, indigenous women, and some Asians, but mostly black and Puerto Rican women. I think now it's thousands, right, of people that I have worked with in reclaiming and self-healing. And to take back your life, to reclaim your spirit, is serious work. It's serious work. And we have to do it in different phases, right? So it's the education around our history, the education around power and oppression, the education about how to eat, right? Um, Many of the women that I have worked with are from all religious backgrounds. So it's like, okay, you're a Christian, eh, look at what's positive, what is earth-based in Christianity. Look at what you can take that will help you to liberate your soul
Mm-hmm.
and yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And really look at the patriarchal structure, right? Um, and did I say food already? Food is very
Yes.
important in this
Yes.
process, right?
Right.
Because the foods that we eat um, create us. So if we're eating pork and poisoning our body, then that's what we're going to become, poison. And then we pass on that to generations. So it's re-looking at a true Taino diet. You know, there were no pigs in Puerto Rico. There were no chickens in Puerto Rico. This is not, this is all European,
Right.
right? So what was the Taino diet? Fish, some birds, but mostly fruits and vegetables. That's what was in abundance and green. So we need to go back to an earth-based diet.
Mm.
And look, you eat a bird or you eat a fish and it's polluted with mercury because our seas and our skies are polluted.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to really look at the environment.
Mm-hmm.
We have a planet that is dying and is fighting back. What are we doing to help that planet
Mm-hmm.
it heal and continue to grow? One of the things that we need to do, and this is what our elders are saying, is that we need to grow our own food.
Right. I agree.
We need to
Yes.
go organic. We need to go back to our native traditions. So then there is our physical health, right? With the food, we need to exercise. We need to stop being sitting and taking cars everywhere. We need to get out there and walk. We need to get in touch with the earth. We need to shut down the TVs and the cell phones, and we need to be with the earth mother and her love for us, right? We
Right.
need to be with that.
Right.
And then there is the a emotional self. All that trauma, that historical trauma that's in our DNA, that it's in our ancestral memories, that is in our physical body. We need to get it out, right? We need to cry. We need to shake. We need to do what we traditionally did. We need to be in ritual. We need to scream if necessary. We need to work on that and process constantly whatever is coming up and release that fear.
Mm.
Release the fear, release the guilt, release all those plastic emotions that come out of Christianity. We need to release the anger and be love and be the light, right? And be cosmic. We are the stars, but we need to reclaim that.
Right.
And then we need to reclaim our spiritual selves. We need to be in ritual 24/7 and in gratitude, because that's where the healing is. And be in forgiveness. And that's very hard. I mean, it's easy to say, right? Gratitude and forgiveness 24/7. But in practice, right? I just had an altercation. Came from a wonderful solstice celebration. I was walking with my Haitian friend and her daughter. After being by the river, after being in prayer, and we ran into some Dominican women with this sign saying that people are lying that there's racism in the Dominican Republic. And I lost it. I lost it. And the woman also lost it. A She was ready to hit me, right? But I didn't move back. I was right in her face, right? Because this is a personal thing, right, for me.
Right.
So we need to detach, because that's what the enemy wants us to do,
Right.
to hurt each other physically and emotionally.
In many instances, it's very difficult for people to detach because I've also experienced that,
No, it is.
Yeah.
It is. But I'm just saying, look, this work is to be able to decolonialize our minds,
Right.
to decolonialize our spirits, right? It is serious work. But we could do it. Because the only reason we're alive is because someone in our lineage was able to step back and say, oh shit, you know, basta ya, enough of this. There's something that I could do. So I think collective work and responsibility is really important in this. A beginning to barter, to share, right? To go back to a, it takes a child to raise, it takes a community to raise a child.
Yes.
Take responsibility not only for ourselves, but for our community. This is the work. This is the work. I believe, I really believe that it is doable. That it is doable. Because, you know, I always tell people, look, for all intentions, I'm not supposed to be talking to you today. I was supposed to be dead. Like most of my peers, most of my peers, most of us who were teenagers in in the 60s, my peers, right, are dead. They're in jail. They're drug users. They have been prostitutes, right? So I'm not supposed to be here. So a light went on me, and I was able to begin to claim and open up to spirit and to being. Because we do a lot of things, but it's to be.
Right.
To be that light, right? To be love. To have possibility in your life. Most of our people have lost possibility. You know, what the way they talk about possibility is hope. I no longer have any hope. That's part of what the colonializers do to us. They take our hope away. They take our creativity away. They take our love away for self and for the other. And we're in some corner, in some closet, hiding. And we need to come out. We need to come out because the Earth Mother is waiting to embrace us. You know, Atabe loves us. You know, and she is real. All you have to do is walk every day, look at the trees, and look at the water, right, and look at the birds. The mother lives, and she lives within us. All we have to do is claim her. Dainoti, lots of love, and thank you.
Thank you. Give thanks. That was a powerful discussion. Until next time. Thank you.